delighted to be joined by Bernie Prendergast here in the Irish National Stud. And Bernie, you're very welcome. It's great to catch up with you.
Thank you.
And tell us exactly where we're sitting, because this is wonderful. I was in around it and it's beautiful.
Yeah, this house is here for as long as I can remember, and it was the home belonged to John and Katie Owens. And my memory of John and Katie were two very old people, and they lived here. John was originally a gardener in the stud some years ago, and he lived here. They'd no running water, very meagre life, but very happy life. And John used to get up every morning and he'd boil 2 eggs in the kettle on the hearth. It was an open hearth, and of course the ashes would be flying up and left, right and centre, and there'd be smoke everywhere. But you know, those 2 eggs, he didn't die until he was well into his 90s.
Really?
So it must have been a cure for something. But he had a hearing impairment, but and every night he'd come down. We just lived down the road, and he would come down to see the 6 o'clock news and the news for the deaf, and he'd have a cup of tea and then he'd have a drink before he went home and off home to bed, and Katie would be here and she'd let him in, and that'd be it again, and the same routine would happen the next day. Yeah, it's a wonderful house, and over the years I remember it being thatched, and I think it was the Thatcher Malloy was the Thatcher back then, and there was always a big excitement when the house would be thatched, because we'd have to look after, of course, John and Katie, as well as manage all the straw and everything for the roof. So it was a good time. They were great times, yeah. And he was very much part of the Irish National Stud family and the community that lived there. Yeah.
And Bernie, this house has only been totally refurbished only in the last year or so.
Yeah.
And it's now on show to the public. It's open to the public.
Yes.
Anybody comes to the Irish National Stud, we'd had over 140,000 visitors here the year before pre-COVID. And now it's the first time that it's on show that people can come in and they can have a wander around and all.
And it's absolutely marvellous, because a lot of these houses have gone into ruins now, and it's so great to see one in such good condition and standing and thatched as it should be, and that people can go in around and have a look and see what it was like to live all those years ago in these houses. It's great, and it's great for everybody. Yeah.
And Bernie, you were literally brought up, you were literally born in the Irish National Stud.
Yeah, I got time to go to Holles Street, I think, and and I was carted home from Holles Street in a taxi home to a house down the road in the Irish National Stud, and I spent all my childhood years there, and had an amazing childhood. I would have met so many wonderful people over the years, made good friends, and it was just amazing, you know. And I suppose at the time I didn't realise fully, you know, exactly what I was growing up in, because the funny thing is, when I got married, the fun was that I was used to manicured lawns and moulded hedges. So there was terrible pressure on my husband to have the lawns and the hedges in. It was a joke, of course, but look, it was beautiful. And I have seen how the stud and the Japanese gardens have diversified over the years, and it's just amazing. For instance, where St. Fiacre's garden is now, that was a swamp, and it was all fenced off, and it was a no-go area. And over the years and successive teams of management, they've turned it into what it is now, which is absolutely amazing. I mean, a day at the National Stud and the Japanese gardens, I think you'd need more than that. I think you'd need 2 or 3 days, because even to sit here under this house, you know, you ponder and you think, and it's a real sense of space and tranquility and all that goes with it. And St. Fiacre's garden is just amazing. And I suppose up in that area of the stud as well, you'd have the wonderful cherry blossoms, and the avenue is lined with them. So when they are out in full bloom, it's like a sight that you won't see very many other places. And they were all great childhood memories for us. And I suppose I was safe in the sense at night the gates of the stud were locked, both the gate here down Tully Road and up on the main Dublin Road. and I suppose I was able to learn to ride my bicycle, and whatever other damage I could do at the time once those gates were shut, you know. And we would have a good community of families within the stud. And of course the big thing was sneaking into the Japanese gardens to have a swim without being caught.
Oh, you swam in the Japanese
gardens? At night now, and it was a big no-no. We got in huge trouble for that, but sure, the more trouble we got in, the more it encouraged us to go and take a dip in. But look, we were hauled out one by one anytime we did it. They were just such happy times. It's very hard to explain clearly the good memories I have and all the experiences that I would have had in the stud and the gardens over the years. And as I said, the wonderful people I've met, salt of the earth, amazing people.
And your dad was the head man here in the Irish National Stud?
Yeah, Dad was the head man, and he started out, John Gannon, and he started out working as a farm labourer, and he was a very able man, and no matter what job he was put at within the stud, he excelled at it. So he kept going and going. Anyway, he ended up that he was stud groom and foaling man, and he didn't want to go into the office. He was offered several times to take a position in the office, and he didn't want that. He wanted to be out on the ground, and he loved the horses. He was good at it, and people that remember him will remember he was first up every morning, and if you tried to catch him out, if you happened to arrive at work earlier than he did, he'd be up earlier the next morning because he had to be first on the ground every morning, you know. But of course it was a nighttime thing too, as you know, with mares foaling. There is no time off, and at the time he was the only foaling man, so he had no relief. So during that season he was very busy and going non-stop, so that's why we lived so closely, you know. And he was good at his job, and he was known far and wide for being a good foaling person. No matter where I go with anyone that has any connection to the thoroughbred industry or the breeding industry, they always refer to how good he was at foaling the mares, you know, and he treated each and every one of them like they were his own. And strangely enough, Sunchari, or the main yard, that was his yard, and that's where he died. Yeah,
really?
Yeah. So, you know, and he's buried just down the road here on the stud grounds as well. So I don't think he would have wanted to be buried anywhere else, because he just loved it, and he loved everything about it, and that would be it, you know. He was happy out and loved what he did all the time.
And Bernie, the National Stud and the Japanese Gardens, they have evolved so much since your early childhood days and got bigger and more successful and a lot more improvements right up into the present day. And they're always, the team here and all the different management teams down through the years, they've always strived to raise the goalposts higher, the crossbar higher, isn't it, to keep on improving the facilities here?
They did, and the funny thing is, when I look at the tourist entrance now over at the Japanese Gardens, I give a little giggle, because I remember the ticket office was a simple, very small garden shed that would fit no more than 2 or 3 people at a squeeze inside, and we had a high stool and a machine where you just press the lever and out to pop the ticket, and you had, you know, the old cash boxes that you opened up and there was no till, there was cash register, nothing like that. And initially the gardens was open from Easter until October, and tourists could only visit the gardens because back then stud farmers were a thriving business, and I suppose it was the fear of people getting hurt, and you know, you'd have tractors and jeeps and horses walking and all of that. But over the years it's been great to see how the stud, in particular this one and other studs, have opened up and have welcomed people in. Just going back to that ticket office, in the 80s they bought another little garden shed, and from that they served tea and coffee and scones with jam and butter on them. That's because people wanted to hang around. It was such a lovely place. They wanted to hang around and they wanted to have their cup of tea and all of those things. So eventually the stud opened up freely to the tourists, and it's just magnificent. I remember the original horse museum, and I remember when Arkle, when the skeleton of Arkle came, the curators worked day and night, and you can imagine getting this skeleton. And I mean, they had to boil the bones to make sure, you know, they were sterile and everything. But each and every one of those bones had to be put together like a jigsaw and in the right place. And it was, as a child, it was just like, oh my God, this is amazing, you know. And I suppose the big time of the year, where we are now, is with the Derby. The Derby was massive. I mean, for weeks beforehand, the gardeners would be out, there wouldn't be a weed to be seen anywhere, and by the time the day had come, every blade of grass would be cut to within an inch of its life, and every hedge trimmed, and the Osborne Centre had been built then, and I remember the big Derby brunches used to happen. And people, you know, owners and trainers and breeders were invited to the brunch, where they came and they had a little bit of a social gathering and something to eat before they went on to the race course over to see the Irish Derby. And of course back then it was on a Sunday. So most people took Monday off, because Monday was going to be a no-go area, because Derby went on from early Sunday morning until the early hours of Monday morning. And it was the chef at the time in the canteen, his name was John Kerr, a wonderful man. And we were all, any able-body was shafted in for chopping and cutting and whipping cream and preparing desserts, and he put out an amazing buffet down in the Osborne Centre. We'd have white tablecloths with sort of harps and all the emblems of Ireland woven into the linen, and sides of salmon colourfully decorated, any meat you could think of. It was just an amazing experience. And something that the staff all looked forward to every year, because you know yourself, sometimes when you're in a stud farm and you get up every day and you work and you've great pride in what you do, but you don't always get to show off. You know, I look after this animal, isn't he or she fantastic? And on that day, the stud, Irish National Stud, was on show, and the staff gave it their best. They'd start maybe 5:30 or 6 o'clock on early on Derby morning, so they could get all the jobs out of the way, and of course grooming the horses and making sure their white bits were white, and whether it was baby powder or something else, the horses were glowing, and it was their opportunity to show what they do, and they took that on and they did a great job. And also you have to think back to then. I mean, travel wasn't as easy as it is now. And I suppose not everyone had gone on an aeroplane at that stage. And when we would be there, and they'd come in cars and jeeps, and there'd be stewards all over the place directing, and the chauffeur-driven limousines would arrive. It's not like now, where every child can hire one when they're going to a dress dance. They were rare sights back then. So, and helicopters, and I suppose as children, when they'd be all in having their fancy brunch, we would be sitting in the seats of the limousines to see what it felt like, and we'd sit into the helicopter, and it was an amazing experience. Like, it was just fantastic. And of course, as we got older, we were very much a part of preparing for that day. But there was such a sense of occasion for I suppose the weeks coming up to it. It was just building and building and building, and it was just an amazing day, and the stud showed itself off to what it should be, and of course I talked about the old museum with Arkle, and in there you had the history of the Irish horse, and also on display was the Aga Khan trophy, and which was taken up to Dublin then around the time of the horse show, and brought back or whatever. And now you look at the most wonderful racing experience museum that has opened just this year down in the National Stud, and the ability for the stud to diversify, and you know what, people just come and they enjoy it, and it's hard to put words in it, because for me it puts a smile on my face. It's happiness. And in particular, I suppose one of the best parts of the year, if not the best part of the year, of course, was the Irish Derby. And I remember those who didn't go, they'd drive their families over to the Curragh on what was then the old main road. We didn't have any motorways or anything like that, and they'd get out of the car and they'd look at the start of the Derby. And for a lot of people that would never have seen a horse in flesh or whatever, that was just a great experience. And they took great joy then at watching themselves on the 6 o'clock or the 9 o'clock news that night, because the cameras would catch them over the fence at the starting line, and it was great, you know.
And the whole town, obviously the Derby Festival as well, and
Yeah.
it was such a big occasion back in those days. So all the community really got behind, obviously, the Derby and the Curragh Racecourse, and also the Derby Festival as well, and all the local businesses brought big bands, and it was always wonderful atmosphere up there. It's gone for a week.
I distinctly remember the early Derby festivals, and I mean the whole community, everyone from the hinterlands right into the town, Newbridge. It was a huge occasion in Kildare town, and sort of in the daytime you'd have traditional dancers from all over Europe in their full attire, Hungarian dancers or whatever they were, and then at night, you know, you'd have the local young lads who were trying to promote themselves. They would be up on the stage doing their bits of music before the big bands, such as the Century Steel Band, or I think one year we had Aslan.
We did, I remember Aslan well. I was only a kid back then.
That was so funny, because the fear among the adults then, there's a rock band coming, and they were talking about boarding up windows in the town and everything.
Christy Dignam and Billy McGuinness and the lads. Yeah.
But it went off well, and it was received. But a lot of people took a week off work holidays for the Derby Festival and all that went around it. And of course you went to the Derby, you had your brunch, you went to the Derby, and the tradition then was go on to the Cadian Hotel, where you'd have Paddy Cole and every jazz band that was possible to hire there, where you'd dance the night away. And of course us younger ones, I wouldn't say I'm the younger ones now, but sure, we'd go on to Nijinsky's, or in the later days Snaffles after it, and oh mother of God. But anyway, look, we survived, and we've managed the great memory as a result of it.
What was one of your first Derby memories?
I had been going racing from the time I was very young. I suppose the most traumatic one for me would have been in 1987, where there was a bomb scare in the grandstand, so we all had to evacuate the grandstand. But we only evacuated as far as the old parade ring, so so if there was a bomb, I don't think any of us were very safe, you know. But look, it was a bit I don't know how safe we were standing at the parade ring and the glass of the grandstand there, but sure, look. There was, at the end of the day, it was a hoax, and it was a bit of fun. And of course all the ladies with their high heels and their grandeur, and there had been a shower of rain, and they were all out across the race course, and they were sinking, and all those memories, you know. It's just something that happens, you know.
Bernie, growing up here as well, it was the visitors, or the National Stud opening up as a tourist attraction didn't happen that long ago, did it? It kind of happened a little bit by accident, is that fair to say?
It was by accident. They had a beautiful garden there, the Japanese gardens, and who was devised by Colonel Hall Walker, and he brought in someone from Japan, Tasaida, and his son Minoru, and that was way back, but it wasn't open to the public. He just devised the garden for his own enjoyment, and I think people used to be hopping over the wall and hopping over the fence, so then they figured there was a bit of an interest, so they just opened it up. And in the beginning I think it was only Sundays, you know, Saturdays and Sundays, and then over the years it continued to grow to what it is now. It's an amazing tourist attraction. Do you know, the little things for me now is the entrance is different, and as I mentioned, St. Fiacre's Garden, the new museum and the horse racing experience is just fantastic. I think it's a great addition. And what strikes me now is, years ago, as we all were, you had to behave yourself when you were out, or your mother and father would be given out to you. But it's different now, and I think the stud has embraced space and children, and they're embracing that opportunity to educate everybody and to give them a taste of the thoroughbred industry and show it showed off for exactly what it is. You know, anybody can be a breeder and anybody can have a race course, and I think that's just amazing. And the families come now, and you know, driving up and down, you'd see them out here playing, and the kids, and the little playgrounds. They didn't have them when I was young. I remember they did tennis court, all right, but you know, whenever you could get into that, because it was chock-a-block with the students. And I suppose the Osborne Centre had a full badminton court and a pool room and table tennis and darts and all those things. And the staff would have a tournament coming up to Christmas for a turkey and whatever else went on. So that was fun. You know, it was a bit fun there. And but it has changed, you know, and it's lovely. It's lovely. The changes are good, and they're moving with the times, which is great, because you don't want it to stay back where it was. You want, for me, I love it. I grew up here, and it'll always be my home, no matter where I live in the world. But do you know what? I just love it, and I just think it always brings a smile to my face, you know. And I haven't gone to the Derby, I suppose, in a few years, but my memory, I suppose, was the last one before COVID. I had an appointment early over in Newbridge, and I was driving back, and I was driving from the roundabout up towards the race course, and it was really early, and the flags were flying high in the wind, and you could see, you know, even at the early morning, men in suits, and the silhouette of the riders out exercising their horses, and you just could feel the anticipation of the race that was about to happen and the day that was about to happen, and you could feel the tension. You got that huge sense of occasion, which, you know what, that's great, and I think Kildare should be proud of itself for that. Both Kildare and the Curragh Racecourse and all the horse racing industry, because like, to create that when you're sitting in a car and you can feel that, you know, you nearly, you know, tense up as you're driving by, that takes doing. That's not easy, you know, and it's great to see.
No, it's wonderful.
It's wonderful to see.
And it's such there's such untapped potential there.
Yeah.
With the Curragh Racecourse, the Curragh training grounds as well, and just to be out there of a morning, and there's nothing like it.
There's nothing like
now,
it.
Winter's morning is different.
Well, that's
Summer's
different now.
morning is
Yeah,
nothing like it.
yeah.
And Bernie, going back here, you just gone back to the National Stud. You've just touched on briefly, which I think is an integral part of the Irish National Stud, is the students, of course, the Irish National Stud course, one of the most renowned courses in the horse industry.
Yeah.
Throughout the world? Throughout
the world, yeah. And, you know, we had many fine students coming through every single year, and to this day, I suppose I was John Gannon's daughter. They never knew me about anything but John Gannon's daughter. And I suppose, no matter where I go now, oh, there's John Gannon's daughter, you know, and they'll always say hello. I met the finest of people. A lot of them went on to be great success in their field, and that's due to the good grounding they got here in the stud. And they did get a good grounding, and they got a great education on all the stud farm management and all that goes with that. I suppose a little story. Before, as I said, we're going back to when travel wasn't that common, or air flights, and we used to take in students from, I think it was South Africa, if I remember right, and we'd get one or two of them every year. And obviously it was a deal with the government, and they wanted to educate back then on how to the farm husbandry and all of that. And they came here to do the National Stud course, but the students used to get pocket money when they came. All students. And it was very little. I think it was £20 a week, 18 or £20 a week, something very small. But the students from South Africa would save it, and because they didn't socialise that much, they were, you know, they were lovely lads, lovely mannerly lads, and with a lot to offer. And when they went back to their own country, sure, they had, you know, the currencies were so different that they had enough to buy cattle and ranches of cattle and whatnot. They went back pretty wealthy just for being a student in the National Stud. So I have a memory of some talks taking place to to put a stop to that from their own government. But you know what? It was great. It's absolutely great. And it makes you appreciate the good life we
Of
have
course,
here in Ireland. You know,
we're very lucky indeed.
We're very lucky.
And
Yeah.
Bernie, there's so many. We've touched on all the different little.
Yeah.
It's a lot of different businesses
Yeah.
in the one.
I know.
It's
I
an
know.
umbrella, the Irish National Stud
It
and
is.
Japanese Gardens. You've obviously got your visitor centre. You have a hugely successful stallion farm, hugely successful breeding centre. You've got the National Stud Course. There's so much happening in the one place here, isn't there?
Yeah. Oh, it's a hive of activity, and I suppose under that umbrella too, you have the local area, and you know the business it brings to the local area and the towns, and you know, if it's only an ice cream or up for a bit of dinner in town, you know, it benefits everybody. I think it does benefit everybody, and it's a great showpiece and a great thing to show people that come to Kildare, look at this is where we are, this is what we're about, along of course with the other attractions around, but it's a very special place, it is.
And Bernie, some of the stallions, there's been some renowned stallions have spent their careers here, the likes of Ahanora, Indian Ridge, now most recently of course Invincible Spirit, one of the top sires in the world. Galileo was born here, of course Urban Sea, his dam was here for many years as well.
The earliest one I would remember would be Lord Gale. He was the longest one, the first one I remember, and he lived to an old age as well, as far as I remember. And Sallust, of course, was another one. Hanora, as you said, all of those. Yeah.
And of course Lord Gale, another hugely successful stallion. And another thing you touched on is the Minaroo yard across the road.
Yeah.
So you gave me a history lesson as well here today.
Yeah.
Minaroo yard got the name from
Tasa Ida, who came over to build and design the Japanese gardens. His son was Minaroo, and he came with his father, and Minaroo Yard is named after Tasa Ida's son, Minaroo. And I suppose another little thing, I suppose it's around the same kind of area, would be that the stallion boxes, you know, anyone who has been here will see they all have windows up in the roof and whatever. And that design idea came from Colonel Hallwalker when he was here. And he believed that, he was a great believer in astrology, and he believed that the horses were inspired by the moon and the stars. So he put windows in the buildings so that the horses could see the moon and the stars. And he really believed that that improved everything about them, their performance and their bloodlines, and kept them in good health. So that's why there's windows there in the stallion boxes down
in the roof.
In the roof.
Yes,
it's all
course.
at the side, you know, so that they can see up and see the moon and the stars. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Of course, that's all changed too. I mean, look, at one time there was nothing, only the path there going over the river up to the stallion boxes, and I suppose now you have all sorts of sculptures from Camilla's visit and the Queen's visit and all of that, and it's great. Everything is moving on and everything is growing, and it's lovely to see all these memories, you know, in front of you. Yeah.
And it's one of the biggest tourist attractions in Ireland, really, the Irish National Stud and Japanese Gardens. I don't think any of us who are local to here realise how lucky we are. And we've got such a diamond on our doorstep.
Should we take it totally for granted? I mean, and we shouldn't, because people travel for miles to come here, and all over the world they make trips, especially to Ireland, to come and to see it and to enjoy it and enjoy everything it has to offer, you know, and you know, they can sit over there in the gardens now in the beautiful restaurant there with Natalie and have lovely, she has lovely lunches, something that you don't have to walk around at all. You can just come in the gate and you can enjoy yourself without putting a step further. But it's just great.
And it's such a peaceful and tranquil setting, the Irish National Stud and Gardens.
Yeah, and I often remember that growing up. There was a little bit up the back of the swamp, we call it, and there was a little stream with a small waterfall at just this height, and there was a tree going across, and when I'd be cross, or when my mother and father were cross with me, or I was cross with someone, I'd go up there and I'd sit for hours and I'd just listen to the water trickling, and and sit there, you know, and it was lovely. You can hear the birds singing here now, and you can imagine if there's no one around and you're listening to the water trickling down. It was just gorgeous. It was lovely.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place.
It was really nice, you know.
Wonderful, wonderful place.
Yeah,
Bernie,
yeah.
it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed our chat, and
Thank you.
I've enjoyed the history lesson I got from you as well.
Yeah. Look, there's so much that there's so much more, and but I'm glad to have the chat with you, and thanks for coming and talking.
No, it
to
has
me.
been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you
you.
very much.